Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Namah Pranavartaye Shuddha-jnanaika-murtaye Nirmalaya Prashantaye Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Baditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. You will chant these three verses we wanted today. Ahankara tadatmyam, ahankarasya tadatmyam,
Asankaratatmyam
ichchaya deha sakshibhi,
Chaya Sakshibhi
sahajam karmajam bhranti,
Sahajam Karmajam Bhranti.
I wanted to do. You've done all this. Oh, yeah, sorry. Do from 10. Ahankaralaye suptau,
Ahankaraye Suktau
Bhaved dehopya chetanaha,
Bhavedehopya Chetanaha
Ahankara vikasardhaha,
Ahankara Vikasardhaha
Sapna sarvastu jagaraha,
Svapna Sarvasya Jagaraha
Antakarna vrittischa,
Antakarna Vrittischa
Itichchayaikyamagata,
Tichayaikyamagada
Vasana kalpayet swapne,
Vasanakalpaye Swapne
Odekshayr vishayan bahihi,
Bodekshayvishayan Bahihi
Manoham krityupadanam,
Manoham Krityupadanam
Lingamekam jadatmakam,
Lingamekam Jadatmakam
Avasthatrayamanveti,
Avastatrayamanveti
Jayate mriyate tatha.
Jayate Mriyate Tatha.
We saw so far that there is tadatmyam, mutual identification. There is only one Chaitanya Vastu, and that is what he calls Sakshi, Atma. But like a reflected object, there is no reflection, there is no reflecting medium, nothing. Like a reflected object, we identify this Sakshi in each individual. That identification comes because of what is called chit-chaya, an expression indicating like the reflection of an object. Atma is not an object. there's going to be no reflection of the Atma. But to use an analogy, Atma is, in quotes, reflected in each individual. And we saw that in a Jadavastu, it is not reflected. It looks like there is no Atma there. No Chaitanyam. It is like having a medium of reflection. I keep repeating the word like, not even. Like in the case of opaque objects, you don't see the reflection of the sun. But in reflecting surfaces, you see the reflection of the sun. Like that, when individual jiva, whether it's a plant or an animal or a human being, you see as though the Atma is reflected. This Chit-chaya, as though reflected Atma, is identified, the ego identifies with it as I am that. Therefore, the ego looks sentient. Therefore, the notion I am the karta. This mutual identification is what he calls tadatmyam, and he gave an example of a red hot iron ball. By itself, the iron ball is cold and hard. But with tadatmyam, with fire, it feels hot and bright. This kind of tadatmyam between the ego and the Chit-chaya seems to make the ego alive. This ahankara, the ego, borrowing its sentiency from Chit-chaya, which itself is only as though reflection of the Atma, therefore really borrowing from Atma, which is the only sentient vastu, then gets tadatmyam with the sharira. Therefore, the sharira becomes sentient. Therefore, all the notions of saying, I am a thinking person, I am a happy person, I am an intelligent person, all that appears because of this tadatmya. And we saw that this tadatmya itself the tadatmyam with the sharira, or before that, the tadatmyam with the Chit-chaya is sahajam, is natural. It is born along and cannot be removed. Therefore, the ego that we know is always as though alive because of the tadatmya with the Chit-chaya. Therefore, that ego, I do, I enjoy, remains with us throughout. The other tadatmyam, once this ahankara is taken as a sentient object, then the tadatmyam with the sharira leads to identification with the sharira. That also stays with us as long as the sharira exists. Sharira will give up when the karma phala has been exhausted. But till then, that will remain. Therefore, till then, tadatmyam also will remain. But the tadatmyam with the atma, which is the only sentient vastu, that is born of ignorance. And will only go when the ignorance is removed. All the efforts we are making is to gain that state of removal of ignorance, which would suddenly free the jiva. Not that the jiva is ever bound, but one recognizes that all this is ignorance. I was never bound. We saw all this. The essential thing to understand is that neither the ahankara nor the manas, all of which constituting the subtle body, nor even the sthula sharira, the physical body, have any sentiency on their own. They're all jada. It doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like that because of tadatmya. But some amount of analysis, some amount of vichara will make it easy to understand that they are all jada. Despite the apparent sentiency, they are all jada. How do we arrive at that? So he says in the next verse, ahankara laye suptau bhaved dehopya chetanaha ahankara vikasardha swapnas sarvastu jagaraha. By analyzing, by examining this avasthatraya, it's a wonderful tool. The three states that we know we exist in, that we keep going round and round in three states. Waking, sleeping, and dreaming. Only three states. In ahankara laye suptau, when one gets into deep sleep, it is a state when neither the physical body nor the sukshma sharira is accessible, not available, because they go into unmanifest state. That is what we call deep sleep. When we are in deep sleep, we have no awareness of the body. When they get up in the morning, you find there are mosquito bites. So you conclude that mosquitoes had a feast last night. But you were not aware at that time. Sometimes you have nice white sheets on your bed and you find blood. Those mosquitoes who have been feasting on you, on your sharira, when you turn around, they get caught under the body, and in the morning you find there is blood spot on the bed sheets. But in the night you don't know. The night when the whole thing is in deep sleep, nothing is known. Because not aware. They are, for all practical purposes, unmanifest. Neither the faculty of knowing nor the physical body is available. That we say, no, it's not awake. Laya. What happens? There. Ahankara laye suptau. In deep sleep, ahankara also becomes unmanifest. Ahankara is not there. That I notion is not there. You recognize it the next morning when you get out of the deep sleep state. But in deep sleep, ahankara is not recognized, is not there. Ahankara laye suptau, in deep sleep, and ahankara also becomes laya, resolved. Then what happened? Bhavet deha api achetanaha. The physical body is also unmanifest. Physical body is unmanifest. This sukshma sharira is unmanifest. Nothing is available except prana. Prana continues. If the ahankara did not go into laya, what will happen? In deep sleep, there is no experience. Experience comes because ego is there. In deep sleep, there is no ego. Therefore, there is no experience. If the ego were not to go into laya, we have experiences. No, Swamiji, many times I'm aware of the mosquito biting me. That's only when you get out of deep sleep. Therefore, there's no experience. In deep sleep, there is no experience. The ego is in the state of laya. If we did not go into the laya, we will have experiences of various kinds. So when the ego is not available, sharira also becomes achetana. So what is the conclusion? The sharira is actually achetana. It is only because of the tadatmyam with the ahankara that it looks as if it is sentient. When that ahankara goes into laya, there is no sentiency left. Ahankare laye suptau bhavet deha api achetanaha. Means what? The Deha is alive, thanks to prana, but is not conscious of itself. There is no conscious awareness of the Sharira. So, in one simple sentence, is shown us that the Deha is by itself a Chetana. What about other states? What is the state called Swapna? It's a state you get into only from deep sleep. You cannot get into a Swapna state from waking. Because to get into the Swapna state, where you create your own prapancham, you have to die to this waking reality. And that happens only when you go into deep sleep. Then from deep sleep, a partial awakening. This Sthula Sharira is no more available, but Sukshma Sharira becomes accessible. Therefore, it says Ahankara Vikasardha. Vikasardha, I mean, Ardha Vikasa. Halfway up. Halfway up means what? There is no kartrutvam. There's only bhoktrutvam. Sukshma Sharira being alive, awake. You create your own prapancham, in which you're also there. In the Sharira that you know of yourself, also there. And from that state of Ardha Vikasa, of what? Of Ahankara. Ahankara goes into Laya in deep sleep. Ahankara goes into Ardha Vikasa, half-bloom state, in Sapna. There is no will involved. You cannot will that today I'm going to dream about something very interesting. You can't will yourself. There's no will involved. When we say Ahankara, we talk of will, right? But in Swapna Avastha, there's no will involved. But yet you project an entire Jagat. When the ego is half aroused, there's no kartrutvam, there's only bhoktrutvam. That state is called Swapna. In deep sleep, what happens? There is no tadatmyam. In the Swapna state, what happens? There is tadatmyam with the chitichaya. But there is no tadatmyam with the physical sharira. The sharira still is unmanifest. But the sukshma sharira is active and projects an entire world. That's a half manifestation. And it says, Sarvastu Jagaraha. Sarvaha tu Jagaraha. In the waking state, what happens? All faculties are up and about. At that stage, there is tadatmyam with chitchaya as well as with the sharira. Therefore, sharira seems alive. Therefore, the three states are in which the ahankara traverses those states. What traverses is not the Atma. In the three states, only the ahankara traverses. Atma is constant. Ahankara goes through its own variation. Laya, Ardha-vikasa and Purna-vikasa. Transition of the ahankara. Atma remains unchanging. So with this kind of inquiry, we know that Atma is the only Chetana Vastu. Ahankara becomes a variable Vastu. And we are aware of the entire Jagat in waking state. In the deep sleep state, Ahankara merges with its root cause, which is Jnanam. There is no other perception, there is no duality. That is the state when we actually are Ishvara. There is no duality. Problem is that we are not aware of it. Because the faculty by which we gain the awareness, called the Linga Sharira or Sukshma Sharira, is not available. Therefore, even though in deep sleep we are Ishvara, the Jiva does not recognize that. In Chandogya Upanishad it says, Andasan anando bhavati, viddhasan aviddho bhavati, upatapi san anupatapi bhavati. In deep sleep state, the blind doesn't recognize that I'm blind. The one who is wounded, viddha, becomes not wounded. Imagine when you are in deep sleep, whatever pains and others I'm suffering during the day in waking hours, they're not there. No, sorry, sometimes I feel I feel the pain. That's only because you have come out of the deep sleep. So the andhaha in deep sleep becomes anandaha. Similarly, the one who is upatapi, who is suffering, who is afflicted, becomes anupatapi. That is the state of deep sleep. Every day we go through this. And people who are not able to sleep suffer like anything. Because all this is seen. Sometimes when you can't sleep, the mind becomes overactive. It starts imagining all the negatives that you've been experiencing. That makes it even more difficult to go into deep sleep. But in deep sleep, the mind is not operational, the physical body is unmanifest. A very simple sentence. Andaha sanna anando bhavati. In swapna, there is no external object perceived. The physical body is unaware. Therefore, there is no interaction with the external surfaces. What is aware is only the Sukshma Sharira. And that Sukshma Sharira projects an entire Jagat. In that Jagat, whatever you see in the physical, in the Swapna, is same that you've seen in the waking state, but it's still not the same. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, "Na tatra rathana rathayoga na panthayano bhavanti." There in the deep sleep, the chariot you see, they use the chariot only example, but you can use any example. It's not the chariot you see in waking state. You create your own chariot. Out of what? That chariot you create from the knowledge gained in the waking state. If you didn't know what a chariot was, how will you project a chariot? Only what is known in the waking state and is stored in the memory can be projected in the dream. So he says that in the deep, in the dream state, there are no chariots, although you see chariots, no horses, no roads. They're all only projections of what we knew in the waking state. And it's all inside. Although it looks as if it's outside. The dream looks as if I saw something outside. In the dream situation, we create huge spaces, large objects, but all here only. All in the knowledge only. We create huge time scales, but all within. Although it looks like we are seeing outside because of projection. So although they appear as if they are outside the body, they are not. That is happening only in the waking state. In the waking state, we recognize both the ego and the non-ego. Ahankara and non-ahankara we recognize. All things external to the Sharira as well as internal to the Sharira. But all three states, what is common is only the Atma, unchanging Atma. What is variable is the state of Ahankara. That is because these different states are only modifications of the vritti, mind. You know, in this, the Shastra uses, even the text uses various words like mind, buddhi, ahankara, sukshma sharira, and then he will introduce one more, linga sharira. Make it even more confusing. And they're unfortunately used quite interchangeably. You would understand what he's trying to say. They are all modifications of the mind vritti. Because of this tadatmyam with chitchaya, I'm deliberately trying to avoid use of the word reflected consciousness. It is only as though reflected consciousness. Because tadatmyam, because in the vritti, there is a presence of the Chaitanyam, seen through Chitchaya. This modification in the mind is described in the next verse, says, Antakarana vrittischa chitichaya aikyam agata. Vasana kalpayet swapne bodhe kshair vishayan bahihi. The mind itself is only a constantly changing vritti. What we call chitchaya is the presence of Chaitanyam in the vritti. Chitchaya aikyam agata. When seeing enjoying the reflection of the Chaitanyam, the presence of the Chaitanyam in the vritti, in the mind. Antakarana is again another word used in this. Antakarana means, karana is instrument. Inner instruments, if you want the literal translation. Antakarana vrittischa, the changes, the modification that take place in the mind, enjoying the reflected consciousness, chitichaya aikyam agata, vasana kalpayet swapne. Because of the identification with the Chaitanyam, the vritti keeps changing, then the modification identifying itself with this chitchaya causes one to project an entire jagat called a dream world. Swapna prapancham. Vasana here means the memories, what has been stored as projected. Kalpayet, swapne, in the dream world, in the dream. You create a whole dream world, you say, of your own. So when the tadatmyam takes place with only the chitchaya, there is no, the tadatmyam with the sharira is not recognized. Then you create conditions for swapna. Projections of whatever was known earlier to create a whole jagat. And this jagat, like I said, you cannot create on your own. There's no will involved. You cannot say, I want to dream about winning a lottery, or I want to dream about traveling the world. You can't decide. So identifying with the chitchaya, this vritti imagines various things, projects various things in the dream. But in the waking, this tadatmyam between ahankara and chitchaya, as well as ahankara with sharira, is recognized. Therefore, in that state, This antakarnani, with the identification with the physical body, imagines objects outside it. In the dream, you imagine and project objects. Objects here mean everything. Objects, thoughts, feelings, everything. And when you get out of the swapna state, you recognize them as being temporary, anityam. Similar thing happens when you're in the waking state. In the waking state, because of the identification with chichaya as well as with the physical body, we imagine all the objects outside. There's a difference between Atma, which is the only Chaitanyam, and the ego identifying with the chichaya, and the ego identifying with the chichaya and the body gives us these states. Now, you can get out of each of these states. You can get out of swapna, go into deep sleep state, or into waking state. You can get out of deep sleep state, go into swapna state, or go into waking state. You can get out of waking state, there you go only into deep sleep state. But when you recognize from this verse, what we have to understand is that when you recognize the presence of Atma in all of this, you can also get out of this waking state into a paramarthika state. So from deep sleep, you can go into swapna or waking state. From the dream, you can go into deep sleep state or waking state. From the waking, you can go into either deep sleep state or go into paramarthika state, which is what he recognized in the 2 verses before when he said, when the tadatmyam with Chaitanyam is understood and ajnanam goes, that tadatmyam also goes. And that can happen only from a waking state. You cannot have this happen from a dream state or a deep sleep state. Normally, I'll keep sleeping all the time, and one day I will recognize the truth. It has to be from the only from the waking state. Antakarana vrikshischa chitichaya aikyamagata vasana kalpayet swapne bodhe shai vishayan bahihi. Shaihi. All sense organs. Chitichaya aikyam agata. When the tadatmyam with the chitichaya and ego is seen, antakarana vritti swapne vasana kalpayet. In the swapna, it projects a complete jagat. When the sthula sharira and ego aikyam happens, tadatmyam happens, then bodhe akshaihi bahihi cha vishayan kalpayet. Then we project the entire jagat that we know in the waking state, which we think is real. But this ego and mind, what causes them to happen? The nature of what is the, hesitant to use the word cause, hetu, for both manas and ahankara. This hetu is also not a very good word here. What is that constitutes these elements? Manoham krityupadanam. What is upadanam? What is upadana karanam for these? Lingamekam jadatmakam. I told you they're going to introduce another word called linga sharira. Confuses even more. Avasthatrayam anveti jayate mriyate tatha. We said earlier that ahankara keeps modifying itself and reflects in the three avastha. He uses one more word called lingam. Lingam is lingyate anena with a lingam, by which you indicate something else is indicated. Is lingam. We used that example, if you remember, in the case of inference. Standard example is you see smoke billowing out of a mountain. You only see the smoke, but that becomes the lingam for fire. Lingyate anena iti lingam. So what is this linga sharira he's talking about here? That by which we can cognize the truth of Brahman, the truth of I, is called linga sharira. Linga sharira essentially is sukshma sharira. That's why we say that a stone cannot gain Brahman. Not only a stone, even the animals cannot gain that. You require a linga sharira of a manushya. So manushya linga shariram is what is required to gain that knowledge of Brahman. When we know through something the reality of something else, when we know through the smoke the presence of fire, that becomes the lingam for that fire. Manoham krityupadhanam lingamekam jadatmakam avasthatrayam anveti jayate mriyate tatha. Manas, what we call manas and ahankara, we can split these, really hair splitting. Ahankara is aham vritti, the I notion. And manas is a karanam, idam vritti. Everything other than I and non-I. Both these together constitute what is called linga sharira. The aham vritti and idam vritti, both are jada, we know that. They both are drsya. But they indicate that if it's a drsya, there must be a drik. So linga sharira in the form of, if you want, aham vritti and idam vritti, ahankara, and 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 The This linga sharira, sukshma sharira, we said when you go into a sleep state, what is projected is what is known, including your own sharira. And in that, what do? You project only the sharira you know. This sharira that you know in the waking state, that is what you project in the swapna. Compare that to what happens when the body gives up. The physical body gives up. Even in swapna, the physical body gives up. It's identical. The physical body is not available. What is available is linga sharira, sukshma sharira. If what happens in death, similar thing happens. Physical body is not accessible, but linga sharira is still around. That linga sharira cannot exist on its own without assuming a form. Again there, what form will it assume? Only the form that it knows, which is the known sthula sharira. Sharira, eva sharira. There is no sharira physically burnt or buried or whatever. And yet it assumes that form. What happens in death is not that you get immediately into another form. There is a period. In fact, one of the reasons we do all these rituals for the departed soul, in quotes, is to ensure that attains sadgati, it gains that gati. The sukshma sharira gains the sharira which is required for the next janma. Otherwise it will be hanging. Because the sharira is not available physically, and yet you assume the same sharira, like you've done in the dream state, there is no certainty there. I don't know, if this is what they probably call a ghost sharira. Sharira eva sharira. So there also it has to accept another sharira, which it will. And then what happens you create a dream in which you're there, you come back. Either directly into waking state or through a deep sleep state, come back to the waking state. What happens in this case? Similar thing happens. You assume another, the sukshma sharira assumes another sharira, comes back. What kind of sharira will assume, where it will come back to, that we don't know. That will depend upon the karma. Look at the anvaya of this verse, might make it easier to understand. Manoham krityapadhanam lingamekam jadatmakam avasthatrayam anveti jayate mriyate tatha. Manoham krityapadhanam ekam jadatmakam lingam avasthatrayam anveti. That one linga sharira which is only one and is jada and is seen as manas and hankara, idam vritti and aham vritti, anveti avasthatrayam. It keeps gaining each of these states. Now remember, these states are mutually exclusive states. When you are in deep sleep, you cannot be in swapna state. Nor can you be in a waking state. Similarly, when you are in swapna state, you cannot be in deep sleep state. Nor can you be in a waking state. In waking state, you cannot be in deep sleep state. Nor can you be in swapna state. They are mutually exclusive. So it's not correct to say that I have gone from sleep to dream to waking to dream or to sleep without understanding what goes, what remains constant. Since these are mutually exclusive, sleeper is not the dreamer. A dreamer is not the waker. But what is common between them, what is unchanging between them, is Atma, I. What changes between them is Ahankara or Sukshma Sharira in Tadatmyam with Chititchaya. Sometimes with the Chaya alone, sometimes with the Chaya and with Sharira. That keeps changing. So Manoham Krityupadhanam Ekam Jadatmakam Lingam Avasthatrayam Anveti. Like in the Swapna and in death, we assume different bodies. Jayate Mriyate Tatha. It appears to keep moving. Born is gone. Is born, gone. But Atma is Jayate Mriyate Kadachit. What seems to go through all this process is what he calls Linga, Linga Sharira. We will continue tomorrow in the next class. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Harihi Om